I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we're highlighting a very important book. It is called 40 Years to Life. It is written by a very talented author by the name of Brenda Bradford Ward. This compelling work offers an in-depth exploration of the complexities and challenges faced by individuals with gender identity conflict, highlighting the societal issues of permissiveness and suppression that affect this community. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us here today on Spotlight, and we ask viewers like you to support writers like her by subscribing to this channel and by purchasing her wonderful book. The links are below. Brenda, thanks so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you, Logan, for the opportunity.
My pleasure. What was your inspiration to write this book, 40 Years to Life? And what do you mean by the phrase 40 years to life?
40 years is the period where I suppressed my gender identity conflict. That was 40 years of doing all kinds of gender inappropriate things and feeling so badly about them afterward. And yet in the throes of them, it was terribly strange, as though there were some force I was fighting, knowing I didn't really want to do gender inappropriate things. And of course, that's very dangerous for a young person. And yet knowing that the self that everyone seemed to see was not all of me. I loved my family, they loved me, I had plenty of support from them. And I don't think transition would have been terribly difficult had I tried to do it earlier, but without mental health support, I'm sure I could not have. So that clearly was an inspiration to act. In fact, an overwhelming compulsion to resolve the conflict. And what society is telling us to do, especially in the state of Florida right now, is if you have gender identity conflict, you have to suppress it. Or if you tell anybody anything about the fact that you have it, they can't do anything about it anyway. Prohibited by law in the state of Florida, practitioners who would help people transition, who really need to transition, and it's having been done inappropriately, like Tavistock in Britain, in England, or some of the atrocious Abigail Schreier's book about the irreparable harm done to young women who suffered from gender identity conflict far less frequently than males. I mean, almost it's so obvious that the egg starts out female and feminine, and it's only if the sperm is successful in causing all of the changes necessary for a male to be produced that the male results. And we know over 99% of time from what everyone else is doing in the rest of the world, almost 8 billion people at this point, don't have a gender identity conflict. They have all kinds of other problems, serious problems, but at least not deciding who they are and being who they are. And certainly what you do as an actor, being the character you're portraying, has to be fundamental to your success. And you know, that's one of the things, I guess, that's been said about some successful actors, that they are themselves in every role they play. I wonder when Felicity Huffman starred in Transamerica and was pretending to be a man, they certainly should have had a transgender person playing that role, in my opinion.
Yeah. But it was a different era when that project came out. Do you think things are better today? I mean, certainly the issue is talked about more. It's been politicized, unfortunately. Like you said, it's not a good atmosphere in Florida, for example. But in places, more liberal states like New York and Massachusetts, you actually see many, many people who are transitioning, expressing themselves in dress and custom and norms and culture as they see appropriate for themselves. So it's a liberating time for some young people compared to how it was when you and I were growing up, correct?
But I think some of it is actually destructive. I don't believe at all that people should try to make a decision themselves on whether they are transgendered or not. Had I not seen the psychiatrist I saw, who had a specialty in various addictions, sexual addictions, as apart from people who really had gender identity conflicts. And he said some of the tools that were available to him in his experience, which was extensive, were becoming less effective as transgendered people talked more and more about their difficulty, the transition. It's something I think that people need to work out with a mental health professional to be sure what the actual problem is. When I saw him, I said, it is a genuine conflict, and one I need to resolve. I didn't care how. If they had to do an ear transplant or whatever might help.
Whatever might
I
work.
really needed to resolve the conflict. It was the conflict that was destructive, not the questioning or what I was wearing or lying to people about why I was buying pantyhose or something. That just absurd stuff.
Yeah.
In
the book, you talk about the pendulum approach to resolving gender identity conflict. Tell us a little bit about this and its effects.
Swinging in one direction or another about whether it's appropriate to talk about the conflict with people or not, whether it needs to be suppressed. I think there has been religious persecution of people deemed to have been possessed or given over to evil, the devil, whatever. And so swinging between those positions of, oh, just do what we want, or, oh, we can't do it at all toward transition is absurd. And ultimately, we need a much better diagnostic and a much better cure. To speak in terms of a cure, whatever that part of our DNA and our brain and sex preference, sexual identity apparently is one of the first things that we experience in utero. And only after we're born do those things begin to grow. Some of the publicists I've been talking with, I've actually been trying to recruit to the cause that we need to support mental health professionals whose specialty is in this area. Unfortunately, sorry about that, it was whatever. Their jobs are hard enough.
Tell me a little bit about what you hope readers will take away from your book.
That suppression is horrible. And that's what I did for 40 years. So I know what it is. And it's actual child abuse to tell a child that she or he should not express her or his gender, nor is professional counseling of any help if you're going to go through puberty in the sex at birth standard. And I would argue the most important aspect of sex is between our ears. Whatever the hormonal urges, and they are significant, of course, if the mind really isn't involved, how does a woman promise to be another woman's husband from traditional, what we know of husbands? And yet there was a case where a female to male still had her uterus and womb and carried their child because the wife couldn't do that, could not bear the child. So in a sense, she was the first man to give birth, depending on how we define man. And when I talk at the beginning of the book about a split between the mean of whatever a person is, falling on one side or the other, masculine, feminine, male, female, a woman who would carry a child and yet profess to be the child's father is going to be way out to one wing or the other of what we consider to be either male or female. And we know 3 standard deviations is 99.7%, I think, of the population. It's been a while since I had statistics, but I believe that's the number. So that if we're talking about something in the 7th or 8th percentile, we're talking about a really small number of people, perhaps smaller than the city I live in. But I think the most optimistic path for researchers is to find whatever the link is, the difference between male and female, and eventually be able to do a diagnostic very close to birth and to correct whatever is wrong there. And the fact that there are so many males, so many females, means there's plenty of opportunity for research and to find, if we know, since we know what a male is, we think we know what a male is. Bruce Jenner, of course, Caitlyn Jenner would take exception to that, but someone who honestly is as male as we can find, and people like that person are going to have one spelling of their DNA that should identify them as masculine and male. So if we find a male who, for whatever reason, presents questions, we should be able to do a diagnosis that would match that person to the standard model to see whether that person really appears to be cisgender or transgendered. And incidentally, the transgendered word seems to be disappearing from the lexicon. Transgender refers to something you can see or hear. You know this about someone, and you know that whether they are transgendered or not, they're doing things that are cross-gender. And that's especially true in pop music, where folks will present an ambiguous appearance, perhaps attempting to appeal as well to the women watching as to men. But transgendered refers to gender identity conflict. And you're probably not going to know whether somebody is transgendered unless they tell you.
Well, you've added to this conversation in a very important way, Brenda. This book is a compelling book. It's of interest to just about everyone. They need to know about all sides of life. This is a side of life that has, many people hurting because of a recognition that just isn't there. The name of Brenda Bradford Ward's book is 40 Years to Life. And it sounds like a prison sentence, and it kind of was like a prison sentence when she was not able to explore her gender properly. And people with gender identity conflict will truly find this book extremely useful, as will their parents, the people who support them in their lives, and so forth. Brenda, thank you so much for joining us here today on Spotlight.
Thank you so much, Logan.
Pleasure is all mine. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.